All right, everybody, welcome back to the Never Stop Building podcast. Luckily for y'all, this is not just me talking for once. I've got a special guest here. I've got Brandon Bowers, lead pastor at Awaken Church here in Charleston, author, father of many, husband. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, dude. So, yeah, dude, I wanted to bring you on here. I've been attending Awaken for some time now, and Brandon and I met recently and had a really cool conversation. In that conversation, I was like, this dude needs to come talk to this audience. So here you are. But yeah, dude, I was hoping you could kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I love the one. I've listened to several episodes of podcasts. I love the theme of it. The idea to never stop building. And I don't know, man, just theme just to get better, and put something in the ground, watch it grow. And if it was easy, everybody would do it, but we know it's not. And the podcast, the whole theme resounds with me. I'm a church planter. And so the church you mentioned, we started it 9 years ago. I started in my living room with a small group of people. And over the last 9 years, God's done more with it than I could have ever imagined. So we never stop building, we never stop growing, we never stop getting better. And that theme, I think, is just one that gives a lot of hope to people who may currently be struggling, but also it infuses a steroid shot of vision to entrepreneurs, to starters, just to keep going. And sometimes we just got to share that hope and borrow some faith to keep going and keep building.
You ain't lying at all. Well, we could end it right there. That was great. Yeah. So planted a church. I mean, you just skimmed over, a decade worth of ridiculously hard work. I appreciate that. But I mean, yeah. So when you and I were talking and you were, and I read your book 1.5 times actually.
Okay.
Half put it down, started it back up again. But 9 years of planting a church. And then you and I were having a conversation over coffee, and it became like really clear to me that planting a church, being a leader, building a team, man, it's not that different than planting a business, being a leader, building a team. Right. I mean, and I was hoping you could touch on that a little bit, like kind of some of the similarities and maybe one of the two differences that you've noticed between the two things.
Yeah, it's good. And, one of the things I believe, Sam, is that the church world, so ministers or pastors can really learn a lot from the business world, the marketplace, or sports teams. I'm a huge sports guy. And typically within the church, and we, I would say for decades, the gap that exists is really a leadership gap. And sometimes I think the principles of good leaderships gets traded in under the covering of, well, we got to care for people and treat them like Jesus, so to speak. But really, man, Jesus is the greatest leader to ever live. And when you look at his ministry, look at what he did. He started the church. He assembled a group of guys called disciples. He invested in them, he equipped them, he empowered them for the day that he would eventually leave them to lead the early church. And so the church really was based on and birthed out of this idea of starting something. And when you look at some of the greatest leadership principles that exist in our world, not in the church, I'm talking about the marketplace, they follow his example to take servant leadership, for instance. The idea of like, hey, I'm not going to lead as a boss. I'm going to serve the people that are on my team, and through serving them, I'll actually empower them, and in turn, it makes me a better leader. A lot of the similarities, I think, starting a church and starting a business, obviously, there's a forecasting piece to it that when you start a church, you go, hey, I'm planting a church, I'm starting a church in this demographic, and this is the people group that I'm going after. Let's say for us, it's Charleston County, Dorchester, Berkeley County. I know the audience. I know who we're trying to reach. I know what their needs are. And so that's going to determine a lot of ways what teaching happens on a Sunday, or what events we put together for the church body. No different than a business. You got to have a target audience. You got to know what you're trying to sell to that audience, and you cater to their needs and you serve them. So I think that's a huge similarity. Starting a business and starting a church, there's a faith piece to it, where you can get all your eggs lined up, you can get everything done just right, but ultimately there's a massive amount of risk that takes place, and you just go for it. And one of our values here, we have what we call our culture code at the church, and one of our culture pieces is that we risk the ocean. It's this idea that we're going to act first, and then we'll ask later. And so I say all the time, like, we pull triggers fast. I think one of the greatest assets you can have as a leader, whether a business owner or whether a pastor, is just gut, and just knowing, hey, we're going to go for it right here. And that doesn't mean like stupidity or foolishness. It's really calculated risk, and having the faith to actually go for some things. And so, I've learned a lot from guys that are in ministry, but some of the greatest, I think, leadership principles I've pulled are from guys out in the marketplace, John Maxwell, John Gordon, some of these leadership gurus who really point us to different businessmen or women, and then through associative learning, grab those concepts and apply them into the church world. I think a big point of difference, those are two similarities. A major difference that I've seen is that within the business world, a lot of times, whether you want to admit it or not, there's a bottom line that you have to pay attention to, right? Like, if you're not profitable as a business, you're not going to last. And
I'll admit
the major
that.
difference, I think it's kind of a reality, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And when you get into the church world, the world that I get to lead and operate within, it's not as clear cut as that, because your most valuable resource are people, and that doesn't always that's not always reflected in the bottom line. And so I think in a huge way, that's where like developmental discipleship takes place, and just giving space for that, because there's I've got some great friends that are in business. Sam, you're a friend, you're in business, and sometimes the trajectory you can plot it out a little easier based on your supply and demand and what your margins are. And church is different from that, because you're not basing it on necessarily a product that you sell and then make money from. It's based on people, and people, believe it or not, are a little more unpredictable than the market supply and demand. So that's probably a major difference that we can go deeper into if we wanted to.
No, it is. I don't know how deep. See, now we could go really deep on that and turn a lot of people off, maybe. So I don't know how deep we want to go down that road. You said a lot of things. You said a few things I do want to touch on. One, and you said, like, Jesus is the greatest leader that ever lived, and I wanted to just touch on that, because one of the things, as I dove into my own faith journey with Christ, one of the things that stood out to me was that. And I don't know about you, but as a leader myself, I have fallen victim to this more than the opposite. But I often want to empathize and make excuses for my team because I want to build and care and love. And it took some years for me. And I just point this out because, like, Jesus did this in a way that is sort of subtle when you read about it, but he held people radically accountable for their actions. Radically accountable for their behavior, their thinking, who they were. And as leaders, I know when you actually care about people, it can be difficult to hold people radically accountable, right? Because that means hard conversations. That means possible disciplinary. That means, like, I might have to let you go. That might be the extreme of radical accountability, but on the inside, it could be someone you've worked with for 7 years, been there from the beginning, that you have to sit face to face with and go, man, you're not fitting anymore. You're not working the way you're supposed. You're not fitting our value structure. That's hard. That's hard. Like,
it's hard.
How do you overcome that? How did you?
Yeah, I think it's so hard, and it's maybe the most challenging part of leadership is ensuring there's clear expectation, and then providing like consistent accountability. And you're right. When I look at the Gospels, I look at Jesus. One of the most startling things that he does is, as his ministry grows and his followers increase, every time in the New Testament you see the number of followers behind Jesus increase. For instance, like after feeding the 5,000, right? Like, Jesus takes fish and bread, he multiplies and he feeds thousands of people. Incredible miracle. So this flock starts to follow him, more and more people. Well, when that happens, what's Jesus do? Instead of accommodating them, he actually raises the standard of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and says, hey, like, and then they start turning away. Like, people start leaving him. This is a very bad ministry growth philosophy, by the way, to teach in such a way that people just start leaving. But what he was doing, what you were just saying, Sam, is that he was basically saying, look, if you want to be my disciple, like there's a higher expectation, and it's not an easier call. And I think that you apply that to say a business or say a church, but as you move to different levels in an organization or an institution or an organism like the church, there's going to, at each level, there's a different layer of leadership and conversations that have to happen. And not everybody that was with you at level 1 is going to make it to say level 7. It's how you have those conversations along the way that determine that. Some may, and most might, but I think as long as there's clear expectations of what that's going to look like, then as a leader, you can have the conversations that bring accountability when that doesn't happen. And I think where I've gone wrong at times, and I'm is providing accountability when maybe the expectation wasn't clear. In other words, like year 1, let's say a startup, like I know you started your business, obviously we started this church, year 1, there's a certain layer of like assumed expectations that are very different than say year 5. And it's my job as a leader to ensure as we move through each season of growth or each season of multiplication, that I revisit the conversation around, hey, this season that we're moving into is going to require this of us. And are you good with that? And am I good with that? And if it's agreed upon, then when accountability happens, it doesn't seem as corrective. It more serves as a reminder, hey, we said we were going to be doing this, and we said we were going to go in here. Like, I'm not seeing you meet me at that place, but this is something that you said you wanted to be. So I think so long as those type conversations are happening consistently, the having to let people go will happen less frequently. But oftentimes it's hard as a leader to keep revisiting those expectations.
I agree with that 100%. I don't know about you, but year one for me was a lot of, I'm going to do everything, and then I'm going to get angry at you for not doing the things I didn't ask you to do.
Yeah.
And then year 2 was a little bit less, and 3 was a little, and then one day it was like a snap where it was like, I not only can I not do this alone, but I'm not even sure why I wanted to, or felt like I had to, and you can do so much more as a team. Yeah. And then you said, I might borrow this, but you said we risk the ocean. I have to, it's funny. A lot of the things we've done at my business have not made sense on paper, but we knew intrinsically it was the necessary next step. Where like maybe a mentor would have said, man, don't do that. Or an accountant maybe would have said, man, don't do that. But man, I mean, we've not just survived, we've thrived through those big risk moments. But I'm touching on this because of my own, I had no idea what starting a church, like I'll be honest, like I thought, I didn't really ever think about it, but if you had asked me, I would have said, I don't know, like church powers that be, like give people a bunch of money and then they build a building and then there's a church. Like, I guess that's, and then I read your book and I was like, dude, this is the equivalent. You said risk the ocean. Like you made a massive risk personally, professionally, for your family. I mean, it was literally no different than starting a business, other than the fact that like you don't work for the profit and the business might even be riskier. I mean, you're at risk in mission. That's like a whole nother ball game. I just, how do you, for the people listening, I mean, how do you come to that? Is that why you have Risk the Ocean as a culture thing now? Because that was huge. Yeah, it is. I mean, whenever we planted the church, so we started that's a 501c3, and you file paperwork with the state. So our articles of incorporation as a church, one of the things you have to create is a dissolution clause, which essentially states, should this venture not make it, i.e. should the church fail, where do you want to send the assets that remain? And I remember seeing that, and I thought, I can't even fathom that. Like, there is no plan B. This is one of those like burn the ships moment where like we're not going back. So I remember wrestling with this whole dissolution clause, because at the time, this was 2013, I was on staff in an amazing church in Spartanburg, South Carolina, 7,000 members, healthy salary, healthy staff, healthy everything, married with 3 kids. But my wife and I were convinced God wanted us in Charleston, South Carolina. And through some mentors and conversations, church planting is the way that we were going to go. And so I knew it was a huge risk. When we moved down to Charleston, I got a marketplace job in government sales and contracting, because I needed an income until the church got to a place where it could help support in some capacity
And so this idea of like, hey, there's no plan B, like this is stupid. Like honestly, like leaving to do that was foolish by all accounts. But we truly believe like God called us to do it. And so it's like, hey, if we have enough faith in hearing his voice to that measure, like then we're just gonna, what's the worst that can happen? Like what, you know what I mean? Like because fear is the thing that drives most decisions. And so most people have a fear because it's a fear of an unknown. Like I can't take that risk because, well, if it doesn't make it, then I don't have a paycheck. Or if it doesn't make it, what about my family? If it doesn't make it, what about my pride? And I think mentally as leaders, if we can go ahead and cross that emotional bridge of like, what if that happens, and go, hey, even if this thing falls on its face, like I'm still going to be okay. It better equips us to make some of those decisions. And I think what happens for me, at least over the last 9 years, and you can relate to this as a business owner, successful business owner who's started something and now it's scaled, the more that you gain, so the more resources or the more money or the more people, the more that you gain, now you have more to protect. And so the tendency is with every year of growth, you tend to risk less. And that leads you into a place of complacency if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to put that value on the wall. Hey, we risk the ocean as a church. Why? We always want to take risks. I'm not saying we bet the whole house on every decision, but we got to remember like the first 6 months, hey, look, there was no going back. And because our trust in God in those first 6 months was extreme. And the danger is now that we grow and accumulate, because we can begin to trust in what we have versus the one who gave it to us. And so it's going, hey, let's continue to have faith, that kind of faith, risky faith, stupid faith, if you will, to take some chances and trust God's going to get us through the same way he did back at the beginning.
Yeah, dude. Wow, I relate to all of that. Yeah. No, and I'm convinced that most people's businesses, and you say risk the ocean, and you said, not bet the whole house, but I'll touch for a second that I think sometimes when people hear risk, it's always and only associated with finances and money. And there's so much more to risk. We as leaders, especially, and the people who are on the leadership team, not just you and me, but the people on we're risking our time. We're risking our pride. We're risking faith. We're risking emotional relationships. We're risking so much, and there's sacrifice involved. Like, you're not everywhere all the time for your kids. You're not everywhere all the time. So like the requirement is to become more intentional in everything. That's how you continue. At least that's how I continue to do that and to grow it is, like my wife and I, for example, it was like non-negotiable date night every week. Like I'm not going to stop growing my business. It's something that I'm committed to and I have to do, but that I also can't stop growing my marriage. And I can't stop growing my parenthood with my children because they need their father, and I don't have to be there every day at 3:30 in the afternoon until 9 p.m. I can do what I need to do, but I need to make commitments, stick to them and show up, And so I just, that is awesome.
Well, and on that piece, I think it's great. You bring up the family front and the marriage front, just the personal side of what we do, because everything we do is going to be an overflow of that place of personal health. And so if your marriage is struggling, you're going to struggle in your business. And if you feel like you're failing as a parent, that's going to come out in how you lead your team. And so I think just having, you're speaking to having some proper boundaries and healthy boundaries and saying, look, I'm going to protect what's most important. Even as I lead what I've given my life to, I'm going to protect these things that are most important. And one of the things that I had to learn quickly, and I'm still learning, is that it's really less about the quantity of time that I might spend in those relationships, and it's more about quality. Because early on, I would I'm gonna be home at 6 o'clock, and I might get home at 6 o'clock. I'm home, but I'm on this thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I'm there physically, but mentally I'm not really there. And realizing, hey, I can get more out of an hour of full presence with my kids than 4 hours of halfway being there. And so just putting quality over quantity, and it's how you spend that time. What that translates into from the work standpoint is that when I'm in the office or I'm with our team, I'm fully there, like I'm fully present, and I'm not trying to balance both roles. And so huge shout out to my wife, Ashley. She gives me space to be able to do that. And so I'm not fielding text message and phone calls all day. She knows, hey, when Brandon's, with the team and Brandon's at the office, he's on. But what she also knows is that when I'm home, I'm on, and I'm there. So I think a great encouragement I would give to leaders is, don't try to multitask everywhere, but wherever you are, be there, and be fully there, and you'll get more fulfillment that way.
I couldn't agree more. And also,
Sure.
I mean, we lead our households too. And
That's
I
right.
and I remember going to a mentor of mine and saying, "Hey, man, I'm anxious all the time. When I'm at work leading my business, I'm guilty and anxious because I feel like I'm supposed to be home. But the second I get home, I'm guilty and anxious. I feel like I should have been at work. And what am I
That's right.
doing wrong?" And he said, "All of your time is unintentional." He
It's
said, "You're
good.
not doing what you're supposed to do while you're at home. So when you leave for work the next morning, you're already feeling bad about the things you didn't do last night. And then you
That's
get to
great.
work and you can't." And I was like, damn. And when I swapped my mentality of my phone stays on do not disturb like all the time, it's right now. I forgot while you were talking, I was getting a phone call and I went, damn, my own discipline. Like had to, but and look, I'm still and I'm not perfect at it, right? I still catch myself. I
Right.
still catch myself at the end of eating dinner, pulling up, going, and nah, let me put that back.
Sure.
But yeah, and I remember in that conversation, I remember the words I said were, "I'm not leading the team that I'm with when I'm with them. I'm thinking about the other team," and then vice versa. And so now it's now I could spend 3 hours a day in my office and be more effective today than I was 9 hours a day during that time.
That's right.
3 hours of intentional leadership is so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So you plant the church. Absolutely killing it there, by the way. For anybody that, I mean, the church is doing well.
Appreciate it, man.
I mean,
For sure.
and I judge that not by any mean other than the relationships I've built and what people are getting out of it.
That's
So when
good.
I say the church is doing well, and it is a beautiful church, amazing worship, music, the whole nine, but I say that because, and I make that my scale on that is what I hear from the people, which means
Yeah,
they're
well,
doing
I love that, because even hear you say that, Sam, it takes me back to when we started it. And one of the things that we really believed in, and we started Awaken Church, is that we wanted to have a church that wasn't just teaching God's word on Sunday or just singing great worship songs, but like, what's the added benefit to people's lives? And are we helping create a sense of community and friendship and relationship that enhances the lives of those who come? And because that's the fruit of our ministry. Like, that's the are we loving well? Are we serving well? Or if Awaken Church just got blown off the map right now, would we be missed? And what I hope would be missed is what you just described. Like, hey, like there's a certain like what we receive being a part of Awaken is we receive this encouragement and this hope. And yes, we get biblical teaching, and yes, we have incredible worship, but our friendships and our relationships and what we're getting out of it, we just found that to be very important as we planted the church. So to me, it's a beautiful thing what you just said. And I think it speaks to the church. It also, for the business owner that's out there right now, there's a product, so to speak. So like, church world, when people think I go to church, typically what they think is like, okay, this is a place that I'm going to get a sermon or some kind of message. I'm going to sing some songs, might take communion. My kids might get certain things out of the program. There's an expectation of, I guess, product that people would expect when they come to church. And in some ways you go, okay, like, yes, you're going to receive all those things, and we're going to do the best we can and making sure those are excellent. But what you're also going to get, and what we pray you receive, and that holds you, that keeps you connected to this community, are the intangibles. It's kind of like a business owner. It's like, yeah, you might be selling like flooring, you might be selling something, and yeah, we're going to give you the best looking like bamboo hardwood floors, but we're also going to make you feel cared for, and we're going to remember your name. And there's going to be a different experience if you start to do business with us that you're not going to get anywhere else. And because I can get bamboo flooring from anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's the culture and the team that sells it to me that's going to keep me committed to that particular business. And so I think church is the same way. Obviously, there could be some variations, but it's whatever you value in your culture, like that's what's going to actually retain people. And so I think that's a good lens just to think through. When I go back to Jesus, it's like Jesus came and they called him a rabbi. There were tons of rabbis. He was a teacher. There were tons of teachers. But there was something different about how Jesus took care of his students or his disciples that was very attractional to tons of other people that followed him. And So for us, it's like, it's not so much what you do, but it's how you do it, and how you treat people along the way that really makes a huge difference.
So were y'all always like that? Were you always culture and people and relationship and friendship based, or did that shift just on a natural course for you as you led planting the church?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So um, I started following Jesus in college. I was a junior in college. When I graduated out, I served in 3 different churches, great churches. Most of them, for the most part, were program based. What I mean by that is incredible messages, incredible music, incredible programs. And my last stint, or where I was serving at this church in Spartanburg, I was the college and young adult pastor. And so I preached every week, led worship services every week, led mission trips, events, you name it. Whenever we moved to plant Awaken Church, here's what I knew. And this just took, I think, being realistic and self-aware enough to say this. I didn't really know how to, or I didn't have a lot of practice in taking someone who did not know God at all, leading them to a place of faith and following Jesus, and then discipling them where they would actually grow in the faith. I'd never really done that because most of my ministry was within churches that were very established. Most of the college students and young adults had been raised in the church. So there wasn't a lot of taking someone from 0 to 10, so to speak, spiritually. So in planting the church, what I knew is, okay, we're not going down to try to reach church people. Like we want to shake the trees and hit the streets and get people who don't have any faith affiliation at all. 84% of the Tri-County area is unchurched. So we knew for a fact there's a lot of people that need to be introduced to Jesus and his church. And so we knew that's what we wanted to do. We looked at the team and we said, hey, when you guys think about your own spiritual development, what was the context that it grew the quickest? And everybody to a man said small group. Hey, I was in this Bible study in college. Hey, I was in this small group after college. Hey, I was in this at my youth group. It's like, okay, we know we're going to grow the most in faith through circles, not just rows on a Sunday. And so we started out with an emphasis on small groups. And what we knew about our own experience was we'll stay committed to that small group if we feel cared about. And we know these are our friends, these are our people. And so really from the bedrock of the church was from the very beginning, hey, we want to put people in circles. We want to get them in homes. We want to get them in small groups. We're going to do Sundays, and we're going to do Sundays to the best of our ability. And, God willing, we kill it every weekend. But what's really going to sustain the community or the relational side of our church is going to be these small groups. So it has been a priority. It's been a priority since day one. And just to keep that sense of chemistry and accountability and encouragement, because you can only do that 1 to a couple hundred on a Sunday. You can't touch as many people, but you start focusing on circles and get people in homes, and that relational glue actually starts to stick.
So how many small groups, what's the growth like from the beginning to now? How many small groups year 1 to year 9?
Oh yeah. I mean, year 1. So first small group was my living room. And as we sit here today, we've had hundreds of small groups. We do them based on semesters. So sometimes group leaders will sign up to lead a group again, or sometimes they'll take a semester off. I think currently there's 60 something small groups that exist. And that's every semester, it's just upticked in the number that are actually offered. But through the years, there have been thousands of people that have come through our small groups. Again, the resounding theme, or what we've always wanted them to say, is that, hey man, I found relationships, I found friendships here, sense of community here. And I just believe the church can offer that in such a way that no other institution in society can.
Wow. I may agree with you, but I'll touch back on that later. So,
okay.
No, but I find, you basically, that's in the, you'd call it the marketplace, it'd be R&D, man. You went out and did some R&D. What I find interesting though, on a lot of what you just said, in the very beginning, you said there was this thing I was not good at. And then I turned my whole focus to building a church to do the very thing I wasn't good at.
Yeah.
Why? Why not do what most other people going, all right, I'm good at these 3 things, so I'm just going to double down on those and ignore all of my weaknesses. So you got with your team said, this is the resounding thing was small groups. And then you said, we're going to come to Charleston. 84%, I think you said, Tri-County's unchurched.
Yeah.
You took all of the stuff that you didn't even take your own comfortability and experience. You really came in and did what your team thought was best on how to grow and serve people. So how do you do that? How do you humble yourself to make those decisions as a leader? Because a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I think you have an option. You can choose humility, or you can choose to be humbled. And I think for me, by default, I got humbled. And it was in the process of really learning what it looked like to plant a church. I went to two different, they call them boot camps, church planter boot camps. It'd be like imagine like an entrepreneurial startup conference, 2 or 3 days. Here's some things you need to put in place. Here's the checklist of what you need to do. And similar, we did that for church planters. And it was in that process where I was asked to define, hey, what's your discipleship process? What do you mean? Well, let's just imagine that like somebody gives their life to Jesus and like you baptize them. What are you doing? What do you do now? And it's sad to say it, but honestly, I'd never really thought that way. I'd never been put in a situation in the church. I think it was just the size I was in, or maybe it's just negligence on my part. But I just always assumed, well, people already know Jesus and they're growing in their faith. Those were the environments I previously was in. And so for the first time in my life, I was 32, I think at the time, 32 years old, 10 years a Christian. And I was having to think through, okay, what do I do with somebody if they're a newcomer? Completely blank. And what I had to do was go back to my own experience. And when I first became a Christian, I had a guy named Eric that led me and discipled me and taught me what it meant to be a Christian. I was in a small group and I was getting one-on-one training from him. And I realized if that worked for me, then that's going to work for other people. And so that's when that process really got put into place. And honestly, Sam, some of it is just the challenge side of it. I mean, just the grind and the challenge side of, can we do this? Can we do this in a pure way? I mean, like when you look at the first church in the book of Acts chapter 2, it says that they met in the temple each week, but they met in homes and they broke bread together and they prayed for each other and they gave as each other had need. And there's this clear picture of a church planting movement where people met in homes in addition to meeting in the temple each Sunday, and it just exploded. And so in some ways it was like, man, let's see if God can just do this again, like let's see if he'll honor, our motivations and our desires to try to do this in his most pure way possible. And I just love the challenge side of it. It was harder. I mean, it would have been easy to come down here and find a building and put a flag in the ground and say, hey, Sunday at 10 o'clock, I'm preaching a message and we got worship. And it's harder and it's slower to develop groups and group leaders. But I think over time, the fruit has been far greater. And to be honest with you, like in the business world, you would say, hey, what makes us stand out in the market? I think in the church world, there's tons of churches somebody could go to if they just want to hear a sermon and some music. We wanted to provide something different. We really wanted this to be, we say it, hey, on Sunday you come in, it's family. We really wanted church to feel like family. And I think for the most part, God's really honored that. Yeah,
I was hoping that some small part of that was going to be because you were feeling competitive and just wanted to prove other people.
I love.
All right. Yeah. Cause all the, and dude, all the other stuff was great. And I felt it, but you were like, and I like to be challenged. I was like, yes. All right. There's a little bit of, I love that you can take that in the church world and be competitive.
Well, listen,
and take a challenge.
You got to. Here's the thing, man. So I have to say this, man. I don't know how many pastors are going to listen to this. I don't even care if it gets back around, but here's the deal. In the church world, there's so much fear to try something new. And a lot of times there's pessimism, or just negativity on, hey, we can't do that because we've never done that. Or, hey, for instance, we moved to Charleston and we started and we're like, hey, we're going to do these small groups. Well, what are you going to do how are you going to do small groups with families that have kids? Where are the kids going to go? Or, man, people aren't going to go into a stranger's house. They're not naturally inclined to go into someone's home they don't know. Like that's going to be intrusive. Or how are you going to organize all this stuff logistically? Like how are you going to communicate like where the groups are and who's leading the groups? And what about training? Like you got to train all these people, and you're talking about training people you don't even know yet, because you're finding your leaders in the harvest. So there were all these questions, and I remember fielding some of these questions. One particular, there's a guy named Carl who was at this boot camp, and he was pressing me on some of these things. And I think, first of all, if you want me to do something, there is no greater motivator than, well, if you send a message to Ashley, my wife, have Ashley tell me I can't do something and then watch what happens.
Okay.
You tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do everything I can to see that through. And I did feel a sense of like, hey, I don't think you're going to be able to lead a healthy church that way. Like that's going to be too slow growing, or man, you're gonna get hurt along the way. People are going to let you down. Like it. And honestly, man, it was like, okay, you know what? Well, let's try. Because what do we have to lose? Again, it's that same mentality. What do we have to lose? We feel like God's leading us to do this, so let's go for it. And had an incredible team around me that when I look back, it's amazing the amount of alignment and unity we had around this philosophy. Would not have happened if they weren't sold out and limited out themselves. So there was definitely this like, I mean, again, one of our pieces of culture is we're in it to win it. We want to be the best versions of ourselves. We want to be the best version of church we can be. And so it lends itself to this like grind toward learning and getting better and growing even through failure. And over this 9-year journey, one of the things I'm most proud of is we're not looking at some destination like, hey, we want to get there. It's just the grind is the journey, and the celebrations along the way about what God's doing. And so yeah, there's definitely competitive spirit in this guy right here.
I absolutely. So you played sports, you were an athlete.
Yeah. And the older I get, the better I was, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. No, I love that. It's so fun and interesting to me, the similarities between, like I said, after we spoke, I just couldn't get out of my head. I'm like, this ain't that different. That different.
No, it's not.
mean, and really what it comes down to, and you're right, there's the bottom line, but like you take I don't know how to word this properly. I like money. Don't get me wrong. And I'm of the firm belief that money is a resource that brings out more of who somebody already is. So if you're good, if you're a man or woman of God, that's who you're going to be, and you're going to use that money accordingly. And if you're not, same deal. But I find it interesting. Like I'm in it for the people. I started my business to make money, and I grew and fell in love with my business because of the people. And then I find it interesting. Like you feel called to start and plant a church, and then everything changes because of people. The philosophy, the business model, the structure, the message, it all changes because of humans. So that being said, so all this, and just like in business, you have to find a way, I assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong, making an assumption here, you have to find a way to communicate this vision to, and yes, amazing alignment, and you have the team that's there from the beginning, and those people you have to continue to communicate this vision over 2 years, 5 years, 9 years, and grow it and retailer the vision. And can you touch on that a little bit? Communicating the vision, setting the expectations, and then holding those. How do you grow that team like that?
Yeah, no, that's great, man. 2 terms so you got vision creator and then vision carrier, right? So some people just aren't visionaries, and I'll give you an example. I'll use my wife Ashley. We can both look at a house. So I've over the last couple of years, flipped a couple of houses. I just enjoy that side of life. But I can look at a house and go, okay, I can walk in and I can see really tight rooms. Just imagine like an old ranch style house. They got small rooms, they got walls everywhere, everything's closed off. Whereas nowadays, everybody wants an open floor plan, right? You got to get LVL beams, knock walls down. I can walk up in a house and I legitimately can see what that house is going to look like with these 3 walls knocked down, right? Like, we open this thing up and we redo the flooring and we put a little, bar buffet here in the kitchen. Like, we got an open floor plan. It looks very different. I actually can't see it. Like she just can't, her mind can't get there. Right. And it's nothing against her. It's just different giftings. And so it's my responsibility to look at Ashley and say, okay, look, this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to look like. And this is what it's going to allow to take place. And essentially paint the vision for her to create buy-in to what the plan is. The hope then would be for her, she hears the vision, now she can carry it. She can go explain that to somebody else. So in church world, and what I do is, okay, here's the vision. Like, we exist to see people far from God awaken to life in Christ. The vision has been created. Core team created that. We've latched onto that. The expectation would be for every leader we have that they grab that vision, they carry it, and you carry it into rooms that I'm not in. I carry it into rooms that our staff's not in, but that vision is being carried into small groups, it's being carried into planning meetings, it's being carried into other places. And the more that we can revisit that and speak to that end, that's why we have it on the wall. When you come in on Sunday, that's the last thing you see before you walk in the worship center. It's a big banner that you walk by Somerville campus, because we want that to be the forefront of everything we do. And so the more people that we can get carrying that vision of who we desire to be, the stronger the unity around that vision is going to be. Now it leaks like anything else. You know, Andy Stanley, Visioneering, great book. It talks about vision leaks. And every now and then, you just have to plug the hole and remind everybody what the vision is. But I think that's the biggest piece, is not expecting those who are vision carriers to be vision creators. Because there's two different roles really. And the second thing I would add is that I think a next layer of growth takes place when your top leaders begin creating their own visions. And what I mean by that, a good example, Lucas Denson, our Somerville campus pastor, where Sam, you and your family attend church. Lucas is a great visionary. Lucas comes up with ideas. Like, Lucas is a guy that, yes, he carries the overarching vision of the church, but at the same time, Lucas will self-create stuff as well. And, I respect that like crazy around Lucas. And so, I think as a leader, being able to spot that in other leaders and not stifle the creation of any vision, but just ensure, hey, as that gets created, let's marry that with the overarching vision of the organization, and let's watch that go even further. And I think that's the biggest piece, is just continue to talk about it, maintain alignment around it. What that means is, practically speaking, for a church, when we think about what we're going to preach about on Sundays, or even the songs that we sing, we're thinking about those things through the lens of somebody sitting in the room who's far from God. Because our vision is, we want to see people far from God awaken life in Christ. We don't want to see Christians just sing a song they like. That would be counter vision, right? That might happen, but our vision really, we want to go after people that don't know the Lord yet, and we want to introduce them to them. And so that really does shape how we do what we do. And I think just reminding people that vision over and over again, so they get old.
So do you, it's very interesting. There's those vision creator, vision carrier. I don't know if you're familiar with the visionary integrator term from the business world. It's the same thing, but it's from it's from a EOS is a business management model, the entrepreneurial operating system, super popular. People come in and implement it in people's companies, but the two main roles of every business, there needs to be a visionary, who you just described as the visionary, the vision creator. The integrator needs to come and take the visionary, usually the CEO's vision, and figure out how to integrate it in each department and amongst each employee. And they have to follow through. They're the action taker. They take the vision, they can hear it and see it clearly, but they need to integrate it with everybody else. So how does like our mission of improving lives by improving homes, and what that means is, I'm talking about our employees, I'm talking about the customer, I'm talking about, we improve lives, period. There's no set on that. We just improve lives, and we do it by getting resources from improvement. But what the hell does that mean to sell on some floors to somebody that comes in the store and leaves and never sees us again? That's somebody else. Somebody has to figure that out. But it was so,
it matters.
It matters. It does. But that's what you just touched on. There's so interesting. There's a mirror in business about what you just talked about. And that's incredible. And on
that point too, you just said it. I mean, that on that point, because again, in 9 years and the church growing to where it is now, there's no question there have been times where people have come in to Awaken, leaders, maybe they were leaders at other churches, small group leaders at other churches, influential at other churches, and they've come in and assimilated into Awaken, only to over time, I don't think intentionally, but create a counter vision. In other words, well, why don't we do this, or why don't we do that? And we've set the vision so clearly to where the vision is the filter on why we do things and why we don't do things. And without that, like if you don't have that clear of a vision, then what ends up happening is you'll end up serving everybody else's vision. And then before you know it, you've got division, which means more than one. So when you have division, that's not healthy for any organization. And so I think as a leader, whether it's in a business or in a church or on a sports team, whatever it might be, the goal of the leader is really to try to paint a clear picture of where we're going, and then maintain alignment and unity around that. knowing full well there's going to be things competing at that unity. But a leader's job is to hold it high and rally people to it.
Yeah. And sometimes just on that, like I've had that happen, the alternate vision creating division. I love that division. Your vision isn't wrong. You just can't do it here.
Right.
That's our vision is this. You could take your vision anywhere you want and you'll probably do wonderful things in the world. That's awesome. It's just not our vision. And sometimes I know people can have a tough time with that. And so, all right. So do you, I'm just asking questions here because now I'm really curious, but I mean, how do you structure, how we do it in the business world? I mean, we have weekly meetings. We go over core values. There's a structure to our meetings. There's a structure to our departments, and we don't nail it perfectly. I mean, we're still growing and figuring stuff out, but I mean, do y'all do the same thing? You got the team meetings, you go over the values, you got structure to how you keep carrying this vision through. Cause now you got two, and I know you've had two campuses before, but I know that's tough. Cause now, you know what I mean? Now you got people, you need division in two places.
That's right.
So how do you keep all that structured?
No, we have a structure. It's so we have a lead team, and then we have two campus teams. So Charleston campus team, Summerville campus team, and then what we call central support. And it's the job of central support to support Tevin Charleston campus, Lucas Summerville campus, and whatever they need, whether it's graphics, whether it's production, it's worship, whatever the need might be to resource as best as possible. And so we have weekly all staffs, and every Wednesday for a couple hours we pull together, lift the vision high, have times of celebration. Hey, how are we winning this week? Hey, gaps, how can we support each other this week? At the same time, what's going on in our people's lives? Like, what prayers do we have this week? How can we lift them up in prayer? What do we have on the horizon? What kind of events, opportunities are coming our way? And that's just for the all staff. Each department, so to speak, worship, ministries, they'll meet together on Monday, and figure out, hey, what went great yesterday? How can we improve? Forecast plans for the weeks ahead. Tevin meets with his team, Lucas meets with his team. There's more meetings involved in the church world than people might think. But most of it is strategy and moving forward and how to best engage with people, not to mention just following up. I guess in your world, it'd be called clients. Our world, we call them guests. So next step cards and people wanting to grow in their faith, so a lot of the same principles again, but people focused. Our greatest resource, and yours too, is your people. In fact, I would say any business or church that has another answer to that is probably wrong. Our greatest resource is people. And if you care for people well and you love people well, I really do believe the other stuff will take care of itself. And again, that's modeled after Jesus' ministry. So man, we got meetings on meetings, sometimes too much. I mean, I'm not a big fan of meetings, and thankfully our team knows that, because you can meet yourself to death. And but I think having effective meetings that are time restricted with agendas and those types of things make us a whole lot better.
You're also a visionary. Visionaries don't do well after like 19 minutes. So right. You know what I'm talking about. You're like, cool, I got the vision up in the air. And they're like, all right, now we're all going to talk about it for 90 minutes. And you're like, I'm going to leave. Like, I did my part.
I'm out.
Y'all got the vision. Do whatever you want. I'm going on to the next thing. Yeah, a little ADHD going on with the visionaries. Right.
That's it.
Oh, man, this is
And I think, too, another reason, though, to what you just said is, anytime you start something, you started multiple businesses, and like I started the church, is that there's everybody's jobs. We have 17 full-time staff. At some point, I've done everybody's job, right? Because you start out, you're a generalist. You got to do everything. Our first hire, first guy we hired, Chris, we used to call him GCD pastor, get crap done. It was just do stuff. Like, all the stuff had to get done. But as you scale, you go from being this generalist to being a specialist. And I think sometimes the reason that people can't make the jump, like high-level leaders can't really move from generalist to specialist, is they have a hard time specializing in one area. And I think that's something really important. They get talked about enough. They get talked about enough in church world. I think sometimes in business world, just like church world, guys will hang on to certain staff or leaders out of loyalty, but knowing that they're struggling to make this jump to being a specialist. And so it actually ends up hurting the organization. When in reality, the best thing might be for that person to send them to go start something else. But I think for me, one of the reasons I try not to get in all those meetings is because I find myself thinking for that position, and I can provide answers or give guidance that actually could handicap that person's growth. So it's actually better for me to like, hey, here's the 10-minute vision. Any questions for clarity? Cool, I'm out. Because then the team actually can execute that in a better way than in some ways my limited thinking would allow it to happen. And so that's another reason I just don't love meetings, man. I try to get out of those things as much as possible.
That was a really sophisticated way to say what I've been telling my team for a while, which is what that was way better than I've been saying. Look, yeah, I just get in y'all's way. I'm only coming in here twice a week, but that was true.
There you go.
That's so true. The reality is, and the reason I got out of the way was because they're so capable and talented and wonderful. But when I'm around, I can't always stop myself from saying something, from input, from let's just do this way because my way is quicker, better, and faster. And so let's just do that. And it stifles people, their growth and their confidence. And then when you're not around, they don't really know how to answer the question that they totally know how to answer, you know?
Yeah. And there's because you're a great leader and you've got such great rapport on your team, there's a natural default when a question's asked. Eyes look at you, wonder what Sam thinks, or I wonder what Brandon thinks. And like, if we're not in the room, that doesn't happen. But if we're in the room, there's this default to essentially the founder, the leader. And it's not that you don't want to answer, but there's just a pressure by our presence that can keep other people from speaking freely. And so I think just trying to create space in some of those rooms for that to happen without inhibiting it, I think is important for us to pay attention to.
100%. And look, you're growing and I want to grow. And what I need from y'all, I need y'all to grow too, because 3 years from now, I need to be an evolved version of myself, which means you need to be an evolved version of yourself. And neither one of us can do that if I'm sitting in this room answering questions for you and you're not, because it's also a safety mechanism for us because it's comfortable. It's comfortable asking those generalist questions from positions I used to do because it's so easy. Oh man, that's a fun day. Sit around and tell people who I know how to do their jobs. But I'm a little bit afraid of learning how to do my new job, which is being a leader. I'm a little bit I'm a little scared of, I have things that I need to be doing, but I'm going to tell the sales guy to write an estimate instead. Like so yeah, that was
a good point, man.
Very, very sophisticated. Yeah. We're going to talk more often. That was way better. I could approach that better moving forward. So, but look, dude, thank you so much for coming on. If you're open, I'm gonna have you back in a couple of months. We'll touch base again. And
that's perfect, man.
This is a good conversation. But look,
I would love that.
Before we call it. I like, if you want, just tell people where they can find you. They find the church, find your book, give people some links and apps so they can get to you if they need to.
Yeah, that's great, man. Hey, most of me is found at awakenchurch.cc. That's the church we've been referencing. And we got multiple services each Sunday in Somerville and Charleston. Book that Sam's referencing, Rise Above the Lies. It's on Amazon. It really speaks to just the lies that leaders believe and how to just embrace truth and overcome so you can have greater success. And that really speaks to just kind of for lack of a better word, it speaks to the leadership experience over the last 9 years with planting this church and some of the stuff that I've had to overcome mentally to become a better leader, and how God just shaped me into who I am. So I'm not saying that as an expert by any means. I do think it's important to share our celebrations and struggles as leaders to help other people grow. So awakenchurch.cc, Instagram, Brandon Bowers. Would love to link up with everybody. And hey, Sam, thanks again for the opportunity, man. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for coming, brother.